20 years ago, 3 little boys found dead in West Memphis, Arkansas. A horrible scene no one in that small town could have ever imagined. Good evening, I'm Dawn Scott. Tonight we look back on the West Memphis murders, the efforts to keep Christopher, Michael, and Stevie's memories alive, and the impact that one day had on 3 teenagers eventually convicted of their murders, sent to prison, and then freed. Also, an exclusive look at what life is like now for Damien Echols, the man who sat on death row for 17 years.
These people stole almost 20 years of my life. So if it comes down to sitting in a dark room and dwelling on what these people did to me, what happened when, or going out and eating ice cream, I'm going to go eat the ice cream.
Also, where does the case of the West Memphis murders now stand? Is there still an active search to find who did this? But first, THV 11's Liz Massey shows us how we got here, how we got to this day.
May 5th, 1993.
I was crying, my friend was crying too.
A town paralyzed with fear.
We're all pretty upset and scared about, what's happened with the boys.
3 8-year-old boys disappear. May 6th.
The boys were tied. Their hands and feet were tied.
I was the one that was down in the water, that lifted my leg up and a body floated to the top of the water.
Stevie Branch, Michael Moore, Christopher Byers murdered. The scene, Robin Hood Hills.
Just devastated. I hate it so bad for these families.
May 7th. Police interview 18-year-old Damien Echols and his best friend Jason Baldwin. June 4th, after hours of questioning, Jessie Misskelley Jr., a mentally challenged teen, confesses, implicating Echols and Baldwin. The next day, he recants. Still, all 3 arrested. Rumors fly, stories of satanic rituals.
Yeah, we all knew.
That they were in the devil worship?
Yeah, everybody just assumed it.
West Memphis.
He was a good kid.
Divided and torn.
That's what all 3 of them are, punks. Punks!
February 4th, 1994. Misskelley found guilty. March 18th. Echols and Baldwin convicted as well.
We, the jury, after careful deliberations, have determined that Damien Echols shall be sentenced to death by lethal injection.
The years following would be filled with hearings, appeals, denials, allegations of a botched investigation. The Free the West Memphis 3 movement picked up steam. Celebrities jumped on board.
I think it's a testament to the greatness of America.
There was also talk of new DNA evidence, new suspects, new witnesses, and some of the victims' parents had a change of heart.
That day I believed what the state told me.
September 30th, 2010.
We can't lose. We're so airtight in everything we have.
Echols' legal team argues its case before the Arkansas Supreme Court. November 4th. The Supreme Court justices unanimously order a new hearing. But before that could happen, a surprising move. August 19th, 2011.
Your Honor, I am innocent of these charges, but I'm entering an Alfred guilty plea today.
A legal maneuver allowing them to plead guilty while maintaining their innocence. The West Memphis 3 freed. But for many, this case is far from over.
They were convicted by a jury of 12 people, and they were found guilty.
3 boys, 3 men.
The justice system failed me May 5th, 1993.
20 years later, lives forever changed.
One of the greatest tragedies in all of this is the short lives of Stevie, Christopher, and Michael. Most people will know them only as victims, but to family and friends, the 8-year-old classmates were something far more. THV 11's Ashley Blackstone tells us they were children whose personalities, smiles, and spirits will never die.
They were the best of buddies, 3 second graders full of life and all boy. Cub Scouts, each with the rank of wolf. This was their school, Weaver Elementary. After class, it wasn't uncommon to find them outside, playing together, riding bikes, and exploring their West Memphis neighborhood. Christopher Byers was the oldest of the trio. He loved to swim, and his family says he was always asking why. His nickname, Wormer, because he liked to climb. Christopher was 49 days away from his 9th birthday. His stepdad, Mark Byers.
I think about my son every day. There's not a day go by that I don't get up and fight for him.
Christopher's neighbor, Michael Moore. Those who knew Michael called him a leader, a little boy well respected by others. In a statement to CNN, his mom wrote, "I lost almost everything, and not a day goes by that I don't mourn for Michael." And Stevie Branch, nicknamed Bubba, a lover of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, animals, and singing. His family says he was already a heartbreaker with his snow-white hair and blue eyes. Known for his glowing personality, Stevie was a mama's boy.
The bandana here, the only thing that I had in my household that had Stevie's scent on it. I've never washed it. When I get the need to just want to feel him again, I'll grab it and I'll hug it, and I'm so thankful I feel an embrace back.
If the 8-year-old boys would have lived, they'd be 28. Instead, a memorial stands at their elementary school. 2 of the kids' homes vacant and boarded up. The woods at the crime scene, Robin Hood Hills, now gone. The boys who played together and died together, now separated. Michael in Arkansas, Stevie, Missouri, Christopher in Tennessee.
But one thing I know for sure, he wouldn't be in a grave, in a cemetery, in a headstone. There'd be more to his little life than that.
Bonded forever by tragedy, but loved ones praying instead they'll be remembered for their precious lives.
Damien Echols spent nearly 2 decades on death row for the killings. Today, the release of his paperback version of his autobiography, Life After Death. He is now settled outside Boston and granted me his first television interview in his new hometown since he set up a business and moved into a new home.
How'd you find the building?
This was actually the very first place I looked at.
For Damien Echols, this is as far away from West Memphis, Arkansas as it gets.
We automatically fell in love with this place from the first time we saw it.
Salem, Massachusetts, a small New England town lined with cobblestone streets, packed with diverse lifestyles, and perhaps best known for its famous witch trials. You identify them with the history here.
I do, just the level of persecution. You know, they sentenced me to death. And it was the exact same thing. They accused me of being a Satanist, of committing human sacrifices, and all these things which were the exact same things they accused the people of back then. Fortunately, they weren't able to kill me like they did the people that they hung.
I like how small it is.
38-year-old Echols and his wife Lori Davis moved to Salem last fall, a year after Echols literally walked off Arkansas's death row. It was all thanks to a rare legal agreement called an Alford plea. He hasn't returned to Arkansas since.
I believe with all my heart they knew we were innocent and they didn't care. I think they knew they had the wrong people, and I think they would have rather executed me and allowed a murderer to walk the streets than to have to come back and admit they screwed up.
That fact alone kept Echols angry and bitter for the first several years on death row.
And I knew I had to do something with that. I had to find some way to deal with it, just because it eats you alive. It eats at your heart.
So Echols, while on death row, began to practice meditation and met a Buddhist spiritual advisor whose photo now adorns his Salem studio. That advisor taught him a practice called Reiki.
Reiki is a Japanese technique. It's very similar to acupuncture, acupressure. It works with the body's natural energy. This is done entirely through touch, through breathing, and through visualization technique.
Echols is now a Reiki practitioner and operates a healing studio in the heart of downtown Salem. What you're using to start over was what almost took your own life.
Exactly. Alternative forms of spiritual practice. Anything outside of the norm that you would encounter in Arkansas. You know, the really hardcore fundamentalist things, the things that my interest in is what made me stand out. The reasons I was persecuted in the first place are what saved my life and what now allow me to help myself and other people.
You have a waiting list of 400 people to give tattoos to?
Exactly, yeah.
And what do they want typically? Or
the only thing I do are X's.
Nowadays, Echols relishes life outside death row, explaining this day the meaning of his many tattoos.
It's from the I Ching, the Book of Changes. What it means is whenever you're facing huge obstacles, you don't focus on the obstacle. Instead, you just focus on putting one foot in front of the other.
Echols also working to nurture a relationship with his now 20-year-old son, Seth, who he's seen and spoken to several times since his prison release. So it's not ever like you can just erase that.
No.
You can't just say, I'm not on death row anymore.
No.
X that out. This is my new life.
No, it's a process.
All of it brought you to this very moment where we are right now.
It did. You know, I always tell people that. I say that whenever you look back at my life, whenever I look back at my life, I can see every single thing forming a chain that brought me to where I am now. And if you take out one single link in that chain, I would be dead right now.
Echols and his wife now working on a third book together, detailing their relationship and their prison correspondence through the years. They plan to return for the very first time to Arkansas this November. Now, of the 3 men convicted, Jessie Misskelley is the only one who stayed in the West Memphis area after their release from prison. THV 11's Ashley Blackstone tracked him down in the town of Earl, but when he saw us, he ran away. However, his dad was willing to talk about what life has been like after serving 18 years behind bars. Misskelley is living with his girlfriend down the road from his dad. He was working for a nearby construction company but was recently laid off. Now he lives off of about $500 a month. That comes from West Memphis 3 supporters. Misskelley's dad says being able to see his son every day is a stark contrast to the years prior when he drove 300 miles round trip to visit him in prison every Sunday.
He's a good-natured kid. He can take it or leave it. But I'll tell you what, it's something that's just seeing him as big as he is. And when he left, he was a little bitty thing. I could whip him when I left, but I don't think I'd whip him now.
Misskelley Sr. says his son won't talk with the media because, quote, y'all are the ones that sent him to the pen. And while this week marks 2 decades since the murders, his dad says the family hasn't talked about the anniversary. As for Jason Baldwin, he's now living in Seattle with his girlfriend and will graduate next month with an associate's degree.
Kind of enjoy what you have, you know, whatever it is, you know, just to make the most of it and enjoy it and then be thankful for it.
Baldwin will start on his bachelor's degree this fall and plans to study law one day. He says he wants to use his education to help prevent innocent people from going to prison. In his downtime, he's been doing a lot of traveling and catching up with family and friends, he says. He also still keeps in contact with Echols, Misskelley, and even some of the victims' parents, many who believe the men are innocent.
It comes back with a lot of responsibility, you know, to, the parents of the kids who were murdered. You know, I feel responsibility to them, to help them, find who really committed this crime.
Baldwin adds while he didn't know the victims, he thinks of them often. So what's next in the West Memphis 3's fight to clear their names?
It'll be over for me when we have a sense of closure, and we won't have that sense of closure until, number 1, me, Jason, and Jessie are completely exonerated. Number 2, the person who committed these crimes is in prison. And number 3, the public officials who did this to us are held responsible for what they've done.
Still ahead, more of my exclusive interview with Damien Echols, his fight for justice, the latest evidence, and where this case stands now when lives forever changed. Returns in 1 minute. In large part, it is on the so-called West Memphis 3 to clear their own names, and they are desperately working to do just that. More now of my one-on-one interview with Damien Echols from his new home in Salem, Massachusetts, where he lives with his wife, Lori Davis. Who do you believe did this?
I don't know. What we say, Lori and I, is that we shouldn't have to say who did this. We should be able to allow the evidence to speak for itself.
But your name is not clear.
Exactly. To this day, the state of Arkansas has still never exonerated anyone. Even whenever they were filing the appeals, their briefs in response to our appeals, the Arkansas Attorney General's office still maintains to this day that the state of Arkansas has never, ever sent an innocent person to prison. This plea allowed them to maintain that.
There are still people who think you did it. The family of Michael Moore. What do you say to these people?
Nothing. I mean, these people have their own issues to deal with, their own problems to deal with. The last thing they probably want to hear from is me. If DNA evidence doesn't convince these people, if eyewitnesses doesn't convince these people, then there's absolutely nothing that I'm going to be able to say that's going to change their mind.
The evidence and eyewitnesses Echols refers to uncovered long after he, Jason Baldwin, and Jessie Misskelley were convicted. Yet the state refuses to look at it, which is one reason Hollywood heavyweights like Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh, along with Johnny Depp, agreed to help.
Nothing ever happens in West Memphis, Arkansas.
We've had 3 children missing since last night.
Several documentaries of the case have been produced. The most recent premiered at Sundance Film Festival, west of Memphis.
Right now we have DNA that puts 2 people at the crime scene. Both of their DNA was found at the crime scene. You know, it's not fun. It's not pleasant having to do this. It's like ripping old wounds open again and again and again. I always tell people, imagine the most traumatic thing that's ever happened to you in your life and then having to talk about it every single day. But at the same time, it's like a necessary evil. We have to keep doing this because it's not over for us.
It's also not over for the families of Stevie Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers. Branch's mother, along with Byers' stepfather, don't believe Echols, Baldwin, and Misskelley committed the crimes, and they support their efforts to find the real killer.
There's a group in Salem that gives an award to people who foster human rights in some sort of way.
Echols now finds solace in the New England town of Salem, Massachusetts, a place he says bears a similar history to the one he knows all too well.
Because this is where the Salem witch trials took place. You know, pretty soon after those trials, whenever they killed people that they accused of witchcraft, they realized pretty quickly afterwards, oh, we messed up.
He says he hopes to one day see and hear the same from officials right here in Arkansas, but also knows justice for 3 little boys in West Memphis may never come.
You know, the only thing that we can do is keep going back to the people who already know the truth and basically saying, please do the right thing. For God's sake, do what you should have done all these years ago.
In the past year, the families of the victims have fought a legal battle of their own. They want to see evidence linked to their son's murders. THV 11's Dustin Wilson brings us their story now.
It's not about movies. It's not about, you know, Damien Echols, his book, and this one's book, that one's book. To me, it's about the baby.
A year-long legal battle has taken a toll on Pam Hicks, the mother of Stevie Branch, one of the victims hogtied and beaten.
2013 was a terrible year for me.
Hicks and John Mark Byers hope the justice system would allow them to see evidence of their son's murders under the Freedom of Information Act.
I just wanted the bad to go away.
Last October, Judge Victor Hill denied that request. However, Hicks' attorneys obtained sworn testimony and submitted them in court as evidence 2 months ago. Those testimonies point away from the West Memphis 3, linking 4 other men to the murders.
Party in this room today that helped kill my son, and it's all I can do to keep from grabbing a hold of him.
The families thought the testimonies would put pressure on prosecuting attorney Scott Ellington to reopen the case. Ellington would not agree to an on-camera interview, but tells us most of the new tips and evidence are not credible enough to get a jury trial. UALR law professor Felicia Epps says it will take a miracle.
Somebody coming forward, confessing to the crime, some evidence that someone else did this crime that would be sufficient to really exonerate them. And then there's a whole question of how they actually get back into court, because a guilty plea, there aren't appeals from, the case is over.
But not for Hicks. She hopes to start a nonprofit group to help other families who've lost children and keep her son's memory alive.
My baby's in heaven. When I look to the skies, as blue as the skies are, he's looking down on me saying, Mom, you can't give up. You gotta keep on, you gotta keep going.
A confidential tip line is still active in this case, 501-256-1775. From 1993 to 2013, ahead we look at how people, attitudes, and the town of West Memphis have all changed over the last 20 years. Lives Forever Changed continues next. One day, 20 years ago, changed the town of West Memphis. And whether you were living in the area at the time, knew the families, or worked this story as a reporter, it had an impact and continues to have an impact on so many lives. Tonight, Stephanie Scurlock, the only TV journalist who's covered the case since the beginning, shares her perspective.
All of West Memphis is just torn up.
The town was pretty much in fear. I remember Pam Hobbs just crying uncontrollably because their child had been found and he was found dead.
Several of Misskelley's wrestling buddies also testified today.
At the time, you know, I was a young reporter. I've been in on it since the beginning.
Get them out of the way of the van!
There was a lot of hatred when you talked about them because of what they were accused of was so horrible.
Because the little boys didn't have no time, you know, so why should they have any time? They should be prosecuted right away.
I watched everything from vilify them to let's free them.
It's been our Salem witch trial from the very beginning.
Then I watched the evolution as the stories began to come out and the documentaries were being made. I watched the evolution of maybe they didn't do it.
I think they had to use money to bring the right support to show that the West Memphis system failed.
It was like all of a sudden I get this phone call from Mark Byers and he's saying, hey, I want to talk. I don't believe they did it.
And when I finally got my answers, none of the roads led to the 3 in prison.
Maybe he was ahead of his time. You know, he listened to Metallica, he wore black. Now kids do that all the time. They do feel like the victims have gotten lost. Dana Moore is not quite convinced that these 3 didn't do it.
We wish them all the best, and our prayers go out to their hearts and their families.
Just, you know, send prayers to the families, continue praying that justice be brought to these families.
We're tired. We need to band together and make a change for our community.
West Memphis will forever have that tag of being the place where the West Memphis 3 happened.
You can find much more about the West Memphis murders on THV11.com on a special page dedicated to the developments in this case. There you'll find a timeline of events, our reports from the day the boys were found and the day the West Memphis 3 were arrested. You can also watch my full interview with Damien Echols from Salem, Massachusetts. Plus, we want to hear what you think about all of this. You can leave your opinion on THV11.com. There's a movement with support around the world to keep the victims' memories alive in their hometown. Next, we show you how Weaver Elementary is making sure Stevie, Christopher, and Michael get a memorial they deserve. To mark this 20th anniversary, a memorial at the boys' former school, Weaver Elementary, is getting a facelift. Last month, the story was posted in the local paper in West Memphis, and then donations started pouring in. Ashley Blackstone takes us there tonight.
On this day, you won't hear the sounds of children playing at Weaver Elementary.
It was community driven.
Instead, construction crews hard at work, making upgrades to the Weaver Reading Grove.
We have been very surprised to get donations from Australia, West Virginia, even local donations.
Sheila Grissom is the school principal. After years of what she calls negative publicity surrounding the case, she's now happy to see the positive.
It's about honoring their memory, and that's the way it needs to stay.
The memorial was constructed in 1994, and after seeing a recent picture in the local paper, community members made plans to renovate. The gazebo got brighter colors and reinforcement to the roof. Plus, there's all new landscaping, 20 rose bushes to mark the 20th anniversary of the boys' deaths.
We don't talk about it very much.
Surrounded by many students' favorite pastime, it's a memorial Grissom admits kids occasionally ask about.
We just try to keep it to a minimum. Don't go into a lot of detail. Simply just say those 3 boys went to school here because we do not want to put fear in where there should be innocence.
Innocence, something the victims will never get to experience. So the upkeep on the playground where Christopher, Michael, and Stevie used to play will continue for years to come. A community rallying together, ensuring the boys' memories flourish.
20 years later, Lives forever changed by the West Memphis murders. I'm Dawn Scott. Thanks for watching.
You might wonder, well, what they would have grown up to be or what they would have grown up to do.
It's divided. Some people say they did it, some people say they did.
It should have had taken more time with evidence.
I feel sorry for West Memphis. It not only suffered the murders, it's now suffered a lot as a result of the way the murders were handled.
When I lay my head on my pillow at night, do I think that the killers are Damien Echols, Jason Baldwin, and Jessie Misskelley? Yes, I do.
The way it's ended, it's now a Hollywood comedy, and I don't like that.
The truth needs to be known. They need to find out who done it.
The defendants have the freedom to say that they're not guilty, but in fact, they just pled guilty.
If we want exoneration, if we want the person in prison, and we want the officials held responsible, we have to keep speaking out.
The families have all been through so much grief and trauma, and then there's still no reconciliation. There's still no answer to what really happened.
So I don't know when it will ever end.